Well, to get an in-depth breakdown of the first 100 days of the Biden administration, we're joined by Lincoln Mitchell, Adjunct Associate Professor of Political Science at Columbia University. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me back.
So set the scene for us. How will this year's address look and feel different from previous presidential addresses or State of the Unions?
Well, first, this isn't a State of the Union. This is an address to both houses of Congress, but it's something that Biden wanted to do because of the 100 days. And it's his first major address of this kind. So that alone is worth noting. This isn't something that happens every year or even during every presidential term. Obviously, the physical look of this because of the coronavirus will be very different as well. But from the political perspective, what's significant to me is that Joe Biden is a president who ran not just by talking about bipartisanship, but by having a whole character that really just screamed moderation. He's an older white Catholic guy at a time when the party is moving leftward, and he ran as I'm the moderate. But what we see is that he's been an activist president, not only an activist president, but a successful activist president. No Democrat in my lifetime, and I'm not young, has been able to accomplish so much in his first 100 days. And that is something that will be recognized tonight, and that is very significant, particularly because Biden came into office during a time of such acute crisis.
So we did get some snippets about what he might be covering tonight. What do we know so far about the topics he'll likely cover, domestic and global?
Well, I think you will see a focus on domestic politics more than international affairs, which is often the case with these things. While we have a lot of kind of medium-level problems out there in the rest of the world, the biggest problem facing the United States remains the COVID vaccine, trying to get the COVID vaccine out there. It remains building our economy. And what he's not going to talk about, but which many Americans are concerned about, is the legacy of the Trump administration, the legacy of the siege of the Capitol, the legacy of all of that. I don't expect a lot of attention on international politics. The one thing he may mention is the drawdown of troops in Afghanistan, where we've been at war now for almost 20 years.
And we're also expecting more on perhaps U.S. infrastructure and education proposals. How likely are they to be addressed, though, by Congress?
Well, he will talk about that today. This is his opportunity to tell the American people, here's why the infrastructure bill is important. Here's why this kind of bill that will help provide services to people is important. Biden has done an interesting thing in his presidency. He's redefined bipartisanship, not to mean what does Kevin McCarthy or Mitch McConnell want, but what do Republican voters want? Now, he doesn't have the support of all the Republican voters, but you don't get to the mid-50s in approval only by getting Democrats. So if he can get his message to ordinary Republican voters who say, you know what, the bridges in my part of town are crumbling. You know what, we could use better health care.
Right.
Then that makes it harder for the Republicans in Congress to be so strong in their opposition. And of course, all of this is about lead up to the midterm elections, because if the Democrats lose control of the House, Biden will have 2 years of investigations. They'll vote to impeach him, all of that, and he knows that. Not for any particular reason other than that's the nature of the Republican Party in Trump and now post-Trump America.
So given that clock is ticking then, as we recap Biden's first 100 days, talk about his biggest policy initiatives and how he's fared.
Well, the $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill is extraordinary. When that number was floated, people didn't think it was doable, and he did that. And that has gotten not just money into people's pockets, but has really helped local governments. It's helped local school systems. So that is an enormously important piece of legislation. The other important thing isn't so much a piece of legislation, but Biden came in promising 100 million vaccines in his first 100 days, and people thought, well, that's ambitious, but it's not going to happen. We're now, I think, above 200 million. So the major thing he had to do was to get vaccines into people's arms, and he did that. And from a political perspective, we may want to think of how do we get the rest of the world vaccinated, because that really needs to happen. But those are the accomplishments, and the American people are really happy about both those things. Yes, there are a small percentage of American people that think the vaccine is some kind of government plot or something like that. But the majority of the American people want the vaccines and are very happy they're getting out there. So those are the two things he'll point at as far as look what I've done so far.
And obviously, one of the reasons people getting more excited about the vaccines is because it's another way to open up the economy. So as we look at the economy then, we've got a few jobs reports so far this year, inflation figures, consumer spending data, and then tomorrow we'll get the first GDP report under Biden's administration. Do we have enough information at this point to really assess his economic performance and agenda in general versus what's left over from his predecessor?
I don't know if we ever have that with a president. You know, presidents get blamed for bad economies and given credit for good economies, but in many cases, it's part of trends that are much bigger than one piece of legislation or one president. So I'm not sure yet. The main indicator I would look at, which we don't have yet, is will K through 12 schools be open throughout the country when the fall semester begins? Now, again, that's not really something the president can decide, but if that happens, there will be a feeling in the United States that we're moving into the post-COVID era, and that will be seen as a big accomplishment for the Biden administration.